The morning sun filtered through the large glass windows of the bustling international airport, casting a golden glow over the travelers rushing to their gates. The air buzzed with the sounds of rolling suitcases, hurried footsteps, and snippets of conversations in different languages. Among the sea of people waiting to board a luxurious first-class flight was Clara, a woman who stood out, though not for the reasons one might expect. Clara was in her early 40s, with soft brown eyes that carried a quiet warmth and a smile that seemed almost shy. She wore a simple cotton dress paired with flat shoes, her only accessory being a delicate silver bracelet around her wrist. Her dark hair was tied back in a loose bun, giving her an understated elegance that went unnoticed by most. In stark contrast to the designer handbags, tailored suits, and flashy jewelry sported by those around her, Clara looked like she belonged on a budget airline, rather than this opulent cabin reserved for the wealthy elite. As boarding began, the line moved smoothly, with passengers presenting their tickets and stepping onto the jet bridge. When it was Clara's turn, the gate agent gave her a polite nod before handing back her boarding pass. She walked down the narrow corridor connecting the terminal to the plane, feeling the faint hum of anticipation from the other travelers. But as she entered the lavish first-class cabin, something shifted. Eyes turned toward her, not with admiration but with skepticism. The interior of the aircraft was breathtaking, even to someone like Clara who had seen luxury before. Plush leather, seats reclined into fully flat beds, each equipped with personal entertainment systems and noise-canceling headphones. Crystal glasses gleamed under the soft cabin lights, ready to be filled with champagne or fine wine. Flight attendants dressed in crisp uniforms greeted passengers warmly, offering refreshments and assistance with stowing luggage. Yet none of these details distracted Clara from the subtle tension building around her. She made her way to her assigned seat near the window, sliding past a well-dressed man already settled in the aisle seat. He glanced up briefly, his expression flickering between curiosity and mild disdain. As Clara took her place, she could feel the weight of stares from nearby passengers. A group of 3 businessmen across the aisle exchanged knowing looks, their smirks growing wider as they whispered among themselves. One of them leaned back in his chair, raising his voice just enough for Clara to overhear. "Looks like someone got lucky with a free upgrade," he said, chuckling softly. His companions joined in, their laughter blending seamlessly with the hum of the engine starting up outside. Clara pretended not to notice. Instead, she focused on arranging her small handbag beneath the seat in front of her, taking care to avoid eye contact with anyone. She pulled out a worn paperback book from her bag, its cover creased from years of use. Flipping open to a marked page, she immersed herself in the story, hoping it would serve as a shield against the unwelcome attention. Despite her efforts to remain invisible, the whispers continued. Another passenger, a glamorous woman draped in diamonds and silk, leaned toward her neighbor and remarked, "Honestly, I don't understand how some people end up here. It's supposed to be exclusive." Her tone dripped with condescension, each word carefully chosen to cut deeper. Clara tightened her grip on the book, her knuckles whitening slightly, but she refused to let her composure falter. The flight attendants moved gracefully through the cabin, distributing menus and offering flutes of champagne. When one of them approached Clara, she politely declined the drink, opting instead for a glass of water. This decision drew another round of snickers from the businessmen. "Champagne too fancy for you?" one of them quipped, earning nods of agreement from his friends. Clara simply smiled, murmuring a quiet thank you to the attendant before returning her attention to her book. Though the mockery stung, Clara reminded herself why she had chosen to fly first class today. It wasn't about showing off or proving anything to anyone. For her, it was a rare moment of indulgence, a chance to relax and enjoy the journey without worrying about tight schedules or cramped seating. And yet she couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't belong here, at least not according to the standards set by the people surrounding her. As the plane taxied down the runway and prepared for takeoff, Clara gazed out the window at the sprawling cityscape below. The buildings shimmered in the sunlight, their reflections dancing on the surface of rivers and lakes. She found solace in the view, letting it distract her from the discomfort brewing inside the cabin. Little did she know the turbulence awaiting her wasn't caused by weather. It was the storm of judgment swirling within the hearts of her fellow passengers. And so, as the wheels lifted off the ground and the plane soared into the sky, Clara remained seated quietly, her presence seemingly insignificant amidst the extravagance around her. But appearances can be deceiving, and sometimes the most unassuming individuals hold secrets that can change everything. As the plane climbed higher into the sky, the first-class cabin transformed into a lively social scene. The initial awkwardness of boarding gave way to an atmosphere of indulgence and celebration. Flight attendants moved gracefully through the aisles, pouring glasses of sparkling champagne and serving trays of gourmet appetizers. Passengers began loosening their ties, unbuttoning collars, and settling into the plush leather seats as if they were hosting a private party in the clouds. The businessmen across the aisle from Clara were particularly animated, their voices growing louder with each sip of champagne. They laughed heartily, exchanging stories about their latest business deals, exotic vacations, and expensive hobbies. One of them, Richard, a tall man with slicked-back hair and an air of self-importance, was clearly the ringleader of the group. He spoke with exaggerated confidence, his words laced with arrogance as he boasted about his collection of luxury cars and membership at an exclusive golf club. Clara tried her best to tune out their conversation, focusing instead on the pages of her book. But it was hard to ignore the subtle glances and snickers directed her way. At one point, Richard leaned closer to his companions, lowering his voice just enough for Clara to overhear. "Look at her," he said, gesturing discreetly toward her, with his glass of champagne. "She's probably never even seen caviar, let alone eaten it." His friends erupted into laughter, their faces flushed from both alcohol and mockery. Someone chimed in. "Maybe she won a contest or something. You know, like those sweepstakes where you get to fly first class for free?" The comment earned more chuckles, and soon the entire group was making jokes at Clara's expense. They speculated about how she had managed to secure a seat in such a prestigious section, dismissing any possibility that she belonged there naturally. Richard, emboldened by the attention, decided to take things further. Leaning forward slightly, he addressed Clara directly, his tone dripping with condescension. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Are you enjoying your flight so far? These complimentary luxuries must be quite the experience for you." The cabin fell momentarily silent, all eyes turning to Clara. She paused, her fingers resting lightly on the page of her book. For a brief moment, she considered ignoring him altogether, but something inside her urged her to respond. Placing the book gently on her lap, she looked up and met his gaze. Her expression was calm, almost serene, betraying no hint of irritation or embarrassment. "Yes, thank you," she replied politely, her voice steady and measured. "Everything has been wonderful." Her response caught Richard off guard. He had expected anger, defensiveness, or perhaps even tears, anything that would fuel the amusement of his friends. Instead, Clara's composure only deepened his frustration. Determined not to let her get the upper hand, he pressed on. "You seem very content," he remarked, choosing his words carefully. "Not everyone appreciates the finer things in life, though. Do you travel often?" Clara tilted her head slightly as if considering the question thoughtfully. "Occasionally," she answered simply, leaving it at that. Her brevity frustrated Richard even more, but before he could come up with another jab, the flight attendant arrived with another round of drinks. Sensing the tension, the attendant hesitated for a moment before asking Clara if she needed anything. Clara shook her head with a small smile, declining graciously. Meanwhile, the mockery continued unabated. Another passenger joined in, this time a woman seated 2 rows ahead. She turned around in her seat, her designer sunglasses perched atop her perfectly coiffed hair. "I suppose we should all feel grateful for the opportunity to share this space with someone so humble," she said, her tone laced with sarcasm. Her remark drew scattered laughter from the group, though some passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure whether to join in or distance themselves from the cruelty. Despite the mounting ridicule, Clara remained unfazed. She closed her book and placed it back in her bag, then reached for the small bottle of water provided earlier. As she sipped slowly, she allowed herself a glance out the window. Below, the world stretched out in endless vistas of white clouds and blue skies. It was a breathtaking view, one that reminded her of how vast and unpredictable life could be. In that moment, she felt a strange sense of detachment, not from the situation, but from the opinions of those around her. Their judgments held no real power over her. They were merely echoes bouncing off the walls of their own insecurities. Richard, however, wasn't done. Emboldened by the lack of resistance, he leaned back in his seat and raised his glass in a mock toast. "To the underdogs of the skies," he declared, his voice dripping with mockery. His friends cheered, raising their own glasses in agreement. Clara watched them silently, her lips curving into the faintest trace of a smile. There was something almost pitiful about their behavior, the desperate need to assert dominance over someone they perceived as weaker. It was a game she had no interest in playing. As the minutes ticked by, the laughter grew louder, fueled by champagne and bravado. Yet beneath the surface, cracks began to form. Some passengers started to feel uneasy, sensing that the line between humor and cruelty had long been crossed. Others avoided eye contact altogether, pretending to focus on their meals or entertainment screens. Even Richard's companions exchanged fleeting glances, their smiles faltering ever so slightly. Clara, meanwhile, found solace in the rhythm of the plane. The gentle hum of the engines, the occasional jolt of turbulence, and the distant murmur of conversations created a soothing backdrop to the chaos unfolding around her. She adjusted her scarf slightly, tucking stray strands of hair behind her ears, and settled deeper into her seat. Despite the hostility aimed her way, she radiated a quiet dignity that seemed to defy explanation. And then, just as the laughter reached its peak, an announcement interrupted the revelry. The captain's voice came over the intercom, informing passengers that the plane would soon encounter some turbulence and advising everyone to return to their seats and fasten their seatbelts. The mood in the cabin shifted instantly, the jovial energy replaced by a collective sense of caution. People scrambled to secure their belongings, and the once boisterous group of businessmen fell silent. For Clara, the announcement was a welcome reprieve. She buckled her seatbelt without hesitation, her movements deliberate and unhurried. As the plane dipped slightly, causing a ripple of nervous murmurs among the passengers, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Outside, the clouds darkened, signaling the approach of rough weather. Inside, the tension lingered, unresolved, but it wouldn't stay that way for long. Little did anyone know the turbulence ahead wasn't confined to the skies. A storm of revelations was brewing, one that would force every single person on that flight to confront their assumptions and perhaps themselves in ways they never anticipated. The turbulence began as a gentle rocking, almost imperceptible at first. The flight attendants moved swiftly through the aisles, ensuring all trays were stowed and passengers were safely buckled in. Clara sat calmly, her hands resting lightly on the armrests while others around her fidgeted nervously or gripped their seats tightly. Outside, the once clear skies had turned ominous, with dark clouds swirling like restless spirits. Lightning flickered faintly in the distance, illuminating patches of the horizon before disappearing again. Inside the cabin, the mood shifted dramatically. The earlier mockery and laughter were replaced by tense silence as the plane dipped slightly, eliciting a few startled gasps from passengers. Richard, who had been so bold just moments ago, now looked uneasy, clutching his armrest with one hand while trying to maintain an air of nonchalance. His companions exchanged worried glances, their bravado melting away under the weight of uncertainty. Even the glamorous woman draped in diamonds seemed less confident, her perfectly manicured nails tapping anxiously against her glass of untouched champagne. Amidst the growing tension, Clara reached into her bag to retrieve her phone. She scrolled briefly before pausing on a message that had just come through. It was brief but intriguing. "Landing soon. Let them see who you really are." Her lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile as she read the words. For a moment she stared at the screen, her expression unreadable. Then, slipping the phone back into her bag, she leaned back in her seat, exhaling softly. Richard noticed the subtle change immediately. There was something different about Clara now, a quiet assurance that hadn't been there before. He squinted slightly, studying her profile as if trying to piece together a puzzle. Was it his imagination, or did she seem taller, more composed? He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but the shift was undeniable. Curiosity got the better of him, and he leaned forward slightly, clearing his throat. "Everything okay over there?" he asked, his tone casual but probing. Clara turned her head slowly, meeting his gaze with eyes that now seemed sharper, more piercing. Gone was the shy, reserved demeanor she had displayed earlier. In its place was a calm confidence that made Richard's chest tighten ever so slightly. "Yes," she replied simply, her voice steady and clear. "Just waiting for the storm to pass." Her response was enigmatic enough to leave Richard unsettled. He opened his mouth to say something else, perhaps another joke or sarcastic remark, but hesitated. Something about her demeanor warned him against it. Instead, he sank back into his seat, shifting uncomfortably as the plane jolted again, this time more forcefully. The turbulence was intensifying, and the cabin lights dimmed momentarily as the aircraft navigated the rough patch. Clara, however, remained unfazed. She glanced out the window, watching the streaks of rain race across the glass. To her, the turbulence felt symbolic, like life itself, unpredictable and full of challenges. Yet she trusted the pilots to guide the plane safely through the storm, just as she trusted herself to handle whatever came her way. Her thoughts drifted briefly to Alexander, her husband, and how proud he would be of her composure in this moment. A small part of her wished he were here to witness it, but she knew the timing of this revelation was perfect. As the minutes passed, the turbulence began to ease. Though the atmosphere inside the cabin remained charged, passengers exchanged nervous smiles, relieved that the worst seemed to be over. But Clara's presence continued to command attention. Without saying a word, she radiated a quiet authority that drew curious stares from those around her. Some passengers whispered among themselves, speculating about who she might really be. Had they misjudged her? Could she be someone important after all? One of the flight attendants approached Clara, offering a polite smile. "Is there anything I can get for you, ma'am?" she asked, her tone respectful. Clara shook her head gently, thanking her with a warm expression. The interaction didn't go unnoticed. Across the aisle, Richard watched intently, his mind racing with possibilities. Why did the flight attendant address her with such deference? And why did Clara carry herself with such poise, even amidst chaos? His unease grew when Clara reached into her bag once more, this time pulling out a sleek leather wallet. She flipped it open briefly, revealing a card tucked neatly inside. Though no one else saw it, Richard's sharp eyes caught a glimpse of the logo embossed on the card. His breath hitched. It was the insignia of Kensington Airways, the very airline operating this flight. His heart skipped a beat as realization dawned on him. Could it be possible? Was Clara connected to the airline in some significant way? Before he could process the implications fully, the captain's voice came over the intercom again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've cleared the turbulence zone and will be descending shortly. We expect to land on schedule." The announcement brought a collective sigh of relief from the passengers, but Clara's reaction stood out. She straightened in her seat, adjusting her scarf and smoothing her dress with deliberate care. It was as if she were preparing for something, or someone. As the plane descended, the city below came into view, its skyline glittering under the late afternoon sun. Clara gazed out the window, her expression serene yet resolute. She knew what awaited her once they landed, the moment when the truth would come to light. For the first time since boarding, she allowed herself a small private smile. The storm outside may have passed, but the real tempest was about to unfold within the terminal. Unaware of what was coming, Richard and his companions exchanged uneasy glances. The mocking confidence they had displayed earlier had evaporated completely, replaced by a gnawing sense of dread. They glanced at Clara repeatedly, searching for clues in her demeanor. Each time they found only calmness, a stark contrast to their own growing anxiety. Finally, the plane touched down with a smooth glide, bringing the journey to an end. As the engines wound down and the seatbelt sign switched off, passengers began gathering their belongings and preparing to disembark. Clara waited patiently, allowing others to exit ahead of her. When it was her turn, she rose gracefully from her seat, her movements fluid and unhurried. Before stepping into the aisle, she slipped off her coat, revealing a tailored blazer beneath. The fabric was elegant yet understated, adorned with a discreet insignia on the lapel, the unmistakable logo of Kensington Airways. Gasps rippled through the cabin as passengers recognized the emblem. Heads turned in shock, whispers erupted, and eyes widened in disbelief. Clara stepped into the aisle, her posture commanding respect. Two impeccably dressed executives appeared at the door of the cabin, greeting her warmly. "Mrs. Kensington," one of them said, bowing slightly. "Your car is ready." The name hit like a thunderclap. Richard froze mid-step, his face pale with horror. Others nearby reacted similarly, their expressions ranging from astonishment to guilt. Clara paused briefly, turning to face the group of passengers who had mocked her earlier. Her gaze swept over them, lingering on Richard for a moment longer than necessary. "It's fascinating," she said softly, her voice carrying a weight that silenced the entire cabin. "How quick people are to judge based on appearances. Respect isn't conditional." With that, she walked away, leaving behind a stunned audience grappling with the consequences of their actions. As Clara stepped off the plane, the bustling terminal seemed to come alive around her. Passengers streamed out of the jet bridge, some eager to reunite with loved ones, others rushing toward connecting flights or baggage claim. Yet amidst the chaos, all eyes were fixed on Clara. The revelation of her identity had spread like wildfire, and whispers followed her every move. Flight attendants who had previously treated her with polite professionalism now greeted her with deference, their smiles warmer and their gestures more respectful. The two executives accompanying Clara moved efficiently, clearing a path through the crowd as they escorted her toward the VIP lounge. Her presence commanded attention, not because she demanded it, but because there was an undeniable aura of authority surrounding her. People slowed their steps to catch a glimpse of the woman, whose quiet demeanor had concealed such immense influence. Some travelers even pulled out their phones, snapping discreet photos or sending hurried texts to friends about the unexpected drama unfolding before them. Back in the cabin, the first-class passengers lingered, frozen in place. Richard stood, near the exit, his face pale and his hands trembling slightly as he clutched his carry-on bag. The mockery that had once flowed so freely from his lips now felt like acid burning in his chest. His companions fared no better. One man wiped sweat from his brow while another stared blankly at the floor, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Even the glamorous woman adorned in diamonds looked shaken, her earlier confidence replaced by visible discomfort. "What do we do now?" one of the businessmen whispered hoarsely, breaking the suffocating silence. No one answered. They were trapped in a storm of their own making, each replaying the cruel remarks they had made about Clara during the flight. Every snicker, every sarcastic comment echoed loudly in their minds, amplified by shame and regret. Richard finally mustered the courage to speak. "We need to apologize," he said, his voice barely above a murmur. The others nodded mutely, though none of them relished the idea of facing Clara after what they had done. Still, they knew they couldn't simply walk away without addressing the situation. Gathering their belongings, they shuffled out of the plane, moving slowly as if dreading the confrontation ahead. Meanwhile, Clara entered the VIP lounge, where plush furniture and soft lighting created an atmosphere of exclusivity. A barista prepared fresh coffee, while attendants offered trays of gourmet snacks. Despite the luxury, Clara paid little attention to her surroundings. She sat down in a corner chair, sipping a cup of tea as she waited for Alexander, her husband, to arrive. Though outwardly calm, her thoughts churned with reflections on the events of the day. She understood human nature well enough to know that people often judged others based on appearances. It wasn't unique to this group of passengers. but seeing it play out firsthand reminded her why humility and kindness mattered so deeply. Moments later, the glass doors of the lounge slid open, and Alexander Kensington strode in. Tall, distinguished, and impeccably dressed, he carried himself with the poise of someone accustomed to leadership. His sharp features softened instantly when he saw Clara, and he crossed the room in long strides to embrace her. "How was your flight?" he asked, concern etched into his voice. Clara smiled, faintly. "Eventful," she replied, choosing not to elaborate further. Alexander raised an eyebrow but didn't press the matter. Instead, he turned to the executives standing nearby, giving them brief instructions about upcoming meetings before focusing his attention entirely on Clara. To anyone watching, their connection was palpable, a blend of mutual respect, admiration, and love. Unbeknownst to them, Richard and his companions hovered nervously outside the lounge, peering through the glass walls. Their initial plan to approach Clara directly faltered under the weight of intimidation. Seeing her seated beside Alexander, a man whose name commanded awe in business circles worldwide, only deepened their unease. How could they possibly explain themselves? What words could undo the damage they had caused? Finally, Richard gathered his courage and approached the entrance. He signaled to the receptionist, explaining haltingly that he needed to speak with Mrs. Kensington. After a brief hesitation, the receptionist relayed the message to Clara. She glanced up, meeting Richard's anxious gaze through the glass. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then with a small nod, Clara gestured for him to enter. Richard stepped inside, his heart pounding as he approached her. Behind him trailed his companions, their faces flushed with embarrassment. Clara rose from her seat, her expression neutral but not unkind. Alexander observed silently, his presence adding an extra layer of gravity to the scene. I wanted to say I'm sorry," Richard stammered, his voice cracking under the pressure. "I had no idea who you were and I shouldn't have said those things. It was disrespectful and I feel terrible." Clara studied him for a moment, her gaze unwavering yet devoid of malice. "You're apologizing because you learned my identity," she said softly. "But knowing who I am shouldn't change how you treat someone. Respect isn't conditional." Her words struck a nerve, resonating deeply with everyone present. Richard nodded vigorously, tears welling up in his eyes. "You're right," he admitted. "I was wrong to judge you or anyone based on how they look. I promise I'll do better." His sincerity seemed genuine, and Clara acknowledged it with a slight incline of her head. Turning to the others, she added, "We all make mistakes. What matters is learning from them." Her tone was neither harsh nor forgiving. It was simply truthful, leaving the group to grapple with the weight of her words. Alexander watched the exchange quietly, pride evident in his eyes. When the passengers finally left, visibly humbled, he placed a reassuring hand on Clara's shoulder. "You handled that beautifully," he said. Clara sighed, leaning into his touch. "It's moments like these that remind me why empathy is so important. People forget that behind every face is a story they don't know." As the couple prepared to leave the lounge, the ripple effects of the incident began spreading. News of what had transpired traveled quickly among airport staff and other passengers. Social media buzzed with accounts of the humble woman who had turned the tables on elitist mockery. Journalists stationed at the airport scrambled to gather details, eager to report on the story. Within hours, headlines would proclaim, "First-class passengers learn humility after mocking mystery woman who owns the airline." For Clara, however, the true victory wasn't in exposing arrogance. It was in planting seeds of reflection. As she walked away arm in arm with Alexander, she hoped that those involved would carry the lesson forward, treating others with greater kindness and understanding in the future. And though the world might focus on the spectacle, Clara knew that real change happened quietly, one heart at a time. The days following the flight were anything but ordinary for Richard and his companions. News of the incident spread rapidly, fueled by social media posts from fellow passengers who had witnessed the events firsthand. Photos of Clara walking confidently through the terminal with her husband, Alexander Kensington, went viral. Headlines like, "First-class mockery backfires as woman revealed to be wife of airline CEO," dominated news feeds, sparking debates about privilege, humility, and the dangers of judging others too quickly. For Richard, life became a whirlwind of regret and public scrutiny. He avoided checking his phone, knowing it would be flooded with messages from colleagues, friends, and even strangers weighing in on the story. Some expressed sympathy while others condemned him outright. One particularly scathing comment read, "Maybe next time you'll think twice before mocking someone just because they don't fit your idea of wealth." Each word felt like a dagger piercing deeper into his already fragile ego. His business partners fared no better. The glamorous woman draped in diamonds found herself excluded from high society events she once frequented. Whispered conversations trailed her wherever she went, forcing her to retreat into solitude. Even the businessmen who had laughed alongside Richard now distanced themselves, fearing association with the scandal might tarnish their reputations. Together they formed an unspoken pact to avoid discussing the flight altogether. But silence couldn't erase the guilt gnawing at them. At work, Richard struggled to focus. Meetings that once energized him now felt suffocating, as he imagined judgmental stares from every corner of the conference room. His assistant, sensing his unease, handed over a stack of emails marked urgent. Scanning through them, Richard discovered angry letters from clients demanding explanations about his behavior on the flight. It seemed someone had leaked video footage of the group's mockery, capturing their laughter and cruel remarks in excruciating detail. The clip circulated endlessly online, turning Richard into a symbol of elitism and arrogance. Desperate to salvage his reputation, Richard decided to take action. He drafted a heartfelt apology letter, addressing not only Clara but also the general public. In it, he admitted his wrongdoing, acknowledging how his actions reflected poorly on himself and society as a whole. "I allowed my assumptions to cloud my judgment," he wrote. "I failed to see the person behind the appearance, and for that I am truly sorry. I hope this experience serves as a reminder to treat everyone with dignity and respect, regardless of outward appearances." Sent copies of the letter to major news outlets, hoping transparency would help mend some of the damage. To his surprise, the response was mixed. While some praised his willingness to admit fault, others dismissed his apology as insincere, a calculated attempt to save face. Critics argued that true remorse required more than words. It demanded meaningful change. Determined to prove his sincerity, Richard began volunteering at local charities, focusing on initiatives aimed at bridging socioeconomic divides. Slowly but surely, he started rebuilding trust, not just with others but with himself. Meanwhile, Clara returned home to a hero's welcome of sorts. Friends and acquaintances reached out, congratulating her for handling the situation with grace and poise. Social media lit up with praise for her composure, with many hailing her as a role model for humility and resilience. Yet despite the accolades, Clara remained grounded. She didn't seek recognition or validation. Instead, she used the opportunity to advocate for empathy and inclusivity. Alexander supported her efforts wholeheartedly. Together, they launched a campaign called Beyond Appearances, designed to challenge societal stereotypes and promote kindness across industries. The initiative included workshops, panel discussions, and partnerships with schools to teach children the importance of treating others fairly. Clara often spoke at these events, sharing her story without bitterness or resentment. Her message was simple yet powerful. We all carry judgments, whether we realize it or not. But when we choose to look beyond the surface, we open ourselves to deeper connections and understanding. Back at Kensington Airways headquarters, the ripple effects of the incident inspired internal changes as well. Employees attended mandatory training sessions on workplace respect and diversity, learning how to create environments where everyone felt valued. Flight attendants received additional guidance on fostering inclusivity during flights, ensuring incidents like the one involving Clara never happened again. Passengers noticed the shift too. Crew members greeted travelers with genuine warmth, going above and beyond to make each journey pleasant and memorable. As weeks turned into months, the initial frenzy surrounding the incident began to fade. However, its impact lingered far longer than anyone anticipated. For Richard and his companions, the experience became a turning point, a harsh yet necessary lesson in humility. They learned to approach people with curiosity rather than assumption, recognizing that wealth and status weren't always visible on the surface. Richard even started mentoring young professionals, emphasizing the importance of character over material success. Clara, on the other hand, continued living her life quietly, letting her actions speak louder than any title or logo ever could. She cherished moments spent with Alexander, finding joy in their shared mission to inspire positive change. Though she occasionally encountered reminders of the infamous flight, a snide comment here, a lingering stare there, she brushed them off with ease. After all, she knew that respect wasn't something given or taken away based on circumstances. It was earned through consistent kindness and integrity. And so the story of the first-class passengers who underestimated Clara came full circle. What began as a tale of mockery and arrogance transformed into one of redemption and growth. Those involved emerged forever changed, carrying with them lessons they would pass down to future generations. As for Clara, she remained steadfast in her belief that true worth lay not in titles or possessions, but in the way we treat others and ourselves. In the end, the flight proved to be more than just a journey across continents. It was a voyage of self-discovery, reminding everyone aboard that sometimes the most profound transformations occur when we least expect them. And though storms may rage both outside and within, clarity often follows, guiding us toward paths of greater understanding and compassion. Months after the unforgettable flight, life had settled into a new rhythm for everyone involved. The story of Clara and the first-class passengers who underestimated her became a cultural touchstone, a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms, classrooms, and social circles around the world. What started as a moment of judgment aboard a luxury aircraft evolved into something far greater, a movement that challenged perceptions, inspired change, and reminded humanity of the power of humility. For Richard, the transformation was profound. Once a man defined by his wealth and status, he now approached life with a renewed sense of purpose. His days of arrogance were replaced by a commitment to authenticity. He began volunteering at community centers, mentoring young entrepreneurs from underprivileged backgrounds. At first, he worried they might judge him based on his past behavior, but their openness surprised him. They saw not the man who had mocked Clara, but someone willing to learn and grow. This acceptance fueled his determination to live differently, to lead by example rather than entitlement. One evening, while speaking at a charity gala, Richard recounted his experience on the flight. "I used to think success was measured by what you own," he admitted, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "But I've learned it's about how you treat people, especially those who seem different from you. That lesson cost me dearly, but it saved me in ways I never imagined." His words resonated deeply with the audience, earning a standing ovation. It wasn't forgiveness he sought anymore, it was understanding, and through his actions he found both. The other passengers who had mocked Clara underwent similar journeys of self-reflection. The glamorous woman adorned in diamonds channeled her energy into supporting women entrepreneurs, using her connections to uplift voices often overlooked in high-powered industries. One of the businessmen donated a significant portion of his fortune to education initiatives, ensuring children from low-income families had access to opportunities he once took for granted. Even the flight attendants who had witnessed the incident shared their perspectives during training sessions, reminding colleagues of the importance of treating every passenger with dignity, no matter how they appeared. Clara, however, remained steadfastly humble. Though her name had become synonymous with grace under pressure, she shied away from the spotlight. Instead, she focused on her work alongside Alexander, expanding their Beyond Appearances campaign to reach even more communities. Together, they traveled to schools, businesses, and conferences, sharing stories of resilience and compassion. Clara's presence alone carried weight, not because of her title or influence, but because of the quiet strength she exuded. People listened when she spoke because her words came from a place of genuine care. At one such event, a young girl raised her hand timidly during a Q&A session. "What if someone judges me anyway?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Does being kind still matter?" Clara smiled warmly, leaning closer to ensure the girl felt seen. "Kindness always matters," she replied, "not because it changes everyone else, but because it shapes who you are. When we choose kindness, we take control of our own story, even if others don't understand it right away." Her response brought tears to the eyes of many in the audience, including Richard, who sat quietly in the back row. He realized then that Clara's wisdom wasn't just for those who had wronged her. It was for anyone navigating the complexities of human interaction. Her message transcended individual experiences, offering a universal blueprint for living with integrity. As the months passed, Kensington Airways became known not only for its luxurious flights, but also for its culture of inclusivity. Passengers frequently praised the airline staff for their warmth and attentiveness, noting how each journey felt like stepping into a space where everyone belonged. The company launched a series of advertisements featuring real stories of connection and empathy, reinforcing its commitment to making air travel an experience rooted in respect. These efforts earned widespread acclaim, solidifying Kensington Airways' reputation as a leader in corporate responsibility. Yet perhaps the most remarkable outcome of the incident was the ripple effect it created beyond the airline industry. Schools incorporated discussions about bias and prejudice into their curriculums, encouraging students to question stereotypes. Businesses reevaluated their hiring practices, prioritizing diversity and inclusion over traditional markers of success. Social media campaigns sprang up, urging users to share acts of kindness they'd witnessed or experienced. In countless ways, Clara's story sparked a global conversation about the values that truly define us. On a crisp autumn morning, Clara stood on the balcony of her home, sipping tea as the sun rose over the horizon. Alexander joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "You've done something extraordinary," he said softly. "People are changing because of you." Clara shook her head, smiling. "It's not about me," she replied. "It's about all of us realizing that we're more alike than we are different. Every person carries struggles and triumphs we can't see. If we remember that, maybe the world will feel a little less divided." Her words lingered in the air, echoing the sentiment that had guided her throughout her life. She didn't need recognition or applause. She simply wanted to leave the world better than she found it, and in doing so, she inspired others to do the same. Years later, when historians reflected on this period, they noted how a single flight had ignited a chain reaction of positive change. The story of Clara and the first-class passengers served as a reminder that moments of judgment could transform into opportunities for growth, if we chose to embrace them. It taught society that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars or possessions, but in the ability to rise above prejudice and extend grace to others. And so, the legacy of that fateful journey endured, woven into the fabric of everyday life. From bustling airports to quiet classrooms, from corporate offices to family dinner tables, the lessons Clara embodied continued to resonate. Judgment gave way to curiosity, arrogance to humility, and division to unity. Through it all, one truth remained clear. Appearances may deceive, but kindness reveals the heart.